Well, I would say primarily it was an update of the work that we're doing and the stage that we're at, and who's involved, and sort of bringing them current with our work, and then also giving them an understanding of what the path looks like as we go forward. What they can expect in the next few weeks and months as we work toward the end of the year to bring this to closure. So it was mostly an update about where are we, what are we doing, so they're clear, and we could get any input from the council in terms of what their expectations are. As far as the project itself, I ended the meeting and basically tried to give the council a sense of what we're seeing as we work through this process. And the punchline there to me is, as much of an opportunity as we felt there was a year ago when we had first done our concept plan, based on the work that we're seeing in the analysis that we're doing today, we think there's an even bigger opportunity here in Billings and Montana for a project that really can be a transformational project for the state.
That's pretty exciting to hear that, and for people to grasp. I mean, we haven't had a transformational project in this community for a long time. Do you feel a sense of buy-in now, or is there still some reluctance to accept something that big and transformational? Change is tough.
Yeah, it is. It is in any community. It doesn't matter if it's a city the size of Billings or a market that's much larger than Billings. The change that we're seeing in this country, the reurbanization that has been evolving, but I think we're going to see evolve at a much faster pace, is very real. And I think it's important for cities throughout the country to really identify what is their plan, what is their strategy to grow and to move forward. I think that holds true in every state with every city. Some cities will prosper, some cities will not. I think in the case of Montana, it's even more important. And I say that because a state with a population, the size of Montana's, you have to have an urban strategy in a state that has a smaller population, an aging workforce, and an economy that's dependent on, the strength and growth of commerce. Well, that has to happen in your largest city. Absent that, given the urban trends that we're seeing in the country that are really going to be important to support any state's growth, Billings has to have a plan for the future. I think it's important, as I said, in every city. I think it's even more important in a state like Montana.
We're starting to talk about convention center, and I believe I heard last night that location could be even a dozen different places, or may not look like a traditional convention center. Can you tell our viewers a little bit more about that?
I think there's 2 points there. Number one, we've been searching for and have not yet found, the right definition, but we view this as being much more than a classic convention center. If you look at convention centers in the region and around the country, they've been fairly static buildings historically. They host a certain number of events of a certain size. They're fairly utilitarian buildings. The vision that we have here in Billings is to do something much more dynamic than that, something that's sort of 2 equal parts. Part A, an asset for the people of the community, where there's great activation, great events, great energy, every day of the year, a place that people locally, gravitate toward. That's one part of it. The other part of it is what you normally think of as a convention center, a venue that brings people to the community from outside, certainly the city and the region. But even in the sense of a classic convention center, we think there's a lot more that can be done, a much more diverse program. And so we're very focused on how to create something that's a much more dynamic building than what would fall under the definition of a traditional convention center today. As to where it goes, we've looked around the city a lot. We've studied a number of different sites. One of the advantages that we see here in Billings is, this is my opinion, but I think there's a number of locations that would work for a convention center of a certain size. It's not always the case. A lot of cities, you might have 3 or 4 locations, but there's really one that makes sense. In the case of Billings, I'm not going to say there's 10 or 12 sites that are all created equal, but there's probably something like 10 or 12 sites that that are very workable. Some a little better than others, but we think there's a number of locations that can work just fine. And that's important. You know, you don't want to be in a situation where it's a single site, you know, and the land cost is unattainable and what have you. So we think that's in time going to be a real positive.
Do you think that it can expand out beyond downtown? I mean, is there a way that this convention center could work in conjunction with other areas of the community, or is it a downtown venue?
No, I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, number one, it will be a magnet. You know, the urbanization that's happening, you need anchors. And in the case of Billings, we think there are three anchors: the convention center, healthcare, and education. Those are probably the three most powerful anchors you could have, number one. Number two, we're not always given three anchors to work with. Usually it's one. So we think that's very advantageous. As to the impact on the outlying area, there's no question. What this is going to do for Billings is grow and diversify the tax base. I said this to the council last night. I've said it every time we've met there. One reality that's going to come from this is when we get our work done, it's not going to be a question of we like this project, we vote it up, we vote it down, whatever that means in time. It's one of two alternatives. Either we're going to choose to support and endorse a plan like this for Billings, or the alternative is going to be we choose not to support this. That doesn't mean, well, we just didn't support the project. That means we've chosen another alternative. And that alternative is going to mean, absent growth, the burden on current taxpayers can only grow. This is a strategy about lifting the economic gain to the city, the county, and the region. And so as it relates to the outlying area, if we can grow the economic base in the core of the city, that will support not just Metro Billings, it will support rural Montana, it will support the state overall. Where there are opportunities with something like a convention center is, as we go through and we program out what the building can do, we believe there are a number of events that are complementary to other assets within the community, be it the parks, rec areas, Metro Park. Other assets within the community will gain by bringing the type of events to Montana that Montana can't host today. This isn't a question about pulling something from across town or elsewhere in the state. This is about bringing business to Montana that can't come to Montana today because you don't have that asset. To the extent that we can get that done, it will lift the entire region and the entire state.
Is there an example of something like that? I mean, if it's something that we don't have the opportunity to get now, throw an example as to what that might mean to, what could we get with this, and we'll leave it at that.
I'll give you my favorite example. We've done all the development work at Lambeau Field since 1999. As we've been working on this, I've started to use this argument with our team that what we need to create is the Lambeau Field in the convention marketplace, right? Lambeau Field is the definition of football. It's iconic, it's got great history and tradition. What we did with Lambeau Field was we created an asset that's now active 365 days a year. It used to be active 10 days a year, period. 10 football games, that was it. Today, that building draws millions of visits a year to what we call the Titletown District. As I've thought about Billings and we've done our analysis, we don't really feel that that venue exists in the convention market today. It's like I said, these buildings are more similar than they are distinct and different if you go from city to city to city around the country. So it's our belief that Billings, given the great lifestyle that you have here in Montana, can create an iconic place that has a presence all of its own nationally in the meetings and conventions industry. And with that, I think you'll get the same kind of sort of additive effect that we've seen with Lambeau Field, where then the other elements of the community will prosper and grow around that anchor, and you will create the kind of economic gain, the kind of visitation draw, and the kind of vibrancy in downtown that a community like this can capture. And in certain respects, it would be harder to do in a larger city. I really believe Billings is is sort of ideally positioned to create this iconic venue in the convention center industry and outclass every competitor that you'd have.
Okay. Lastly, where do you think we are in the community right now as far as support? Is it, I don't know that you need to put a percentage on it, but do you feel that there's a groundswell of support growing, or do you feel, gosh, we have a lot of people that are still outside the fence on the negative side?
It's early. I think that's just a fact. You know, we've been working on this for quite a while. There's a lot of work you have to get done to sort of build the argument and to formulate the plan and to measure the economics and what have you. So I think it's early for people to judge things up or down. Having said that, I think there's a lot of support. And I think the support, as much as anything, comes from just the sort of sheer will and desire to see an idea and to see a plan that can position Billings in the state of Montana very differently for the future. I think that's the genesis of it. I think as we talk about things like convention center and these downtown districts and growth, I think it's piqued people's curiosity in a very positive way, and they want to be supportive. I think as the plans mature, we'll give people something that they can really get behind and rally and support. And really the only thing I would ask of people at this point is really three things. Be patient and give the process time to work itself through. A lot of work being done with a lot of smart people that have a lot of experience doing this. So give it time. Secondly, you know, keep an open mind and a focus on communities have to have a strategy for the future. You have to have a plan. Growth is not just going to, you know, to be there. Things might have been very good in the past. It's a much more competitive world looking forward. In Montana, you have among the most aging workforces in the United States. The pressure to retool your economy and to rebuild the workforce is greater than it's ever been before. And that's only going to magnify. You have to have a plan for the future. So as this plan comes together, we would only ask, keep in mind, you know, do nothing, live by the rules of the past is a bad strategy. It's not a strategy. You have to have a plan. And the third point is what I said before, which is simply, absent this, the alternative decision that you are making is our taxpayers today are going to bear a greater burden in the future if we don't have a plan. And so when you look at the plan, you might say, I like this, I like that, et cetera. But if we don't support something, what we're saying is we accept the burden of greater tax, you know, impact individually on us to support basic city services, basic health care, basic education, both within the city and throughout rural Montana. I mean, if you want great education, great health care, you know, a strong base to the economy, a retooling of the workforce, you have to have a plan to do that.
Okay, good. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
What do we see next? I mean, what's our